stuck in the mail. Stuck in the mail. Stuck in the mail.
Well, welcome everybody. I haven't prepared an intro, but this is Stuck in the Mail second episode
Third
pod.
episode.
Third episode. Yeah, well, we count the last one was first, but regardless of that, this is the second video pod of Stuck in the Mail, and this one is on Ween's sophomore album, The Pod, 1991 by Shimmy Disc. Their first album was released on Twin Tone, which is a Minneapolis label, and I have no idea why, since they're from Pennsylvania. But Mike, do you know what Shimmy Disc is familiar for?
No, I don't.
I'm the record label guy, and the guy throwing all my record label stuff. Shimmy Disc is actually a pretty famous label started by the gentleman in this group, Bongwater, Mark
Oh,
Kramer, and his wife. And they are responsible for putting out some pretty amazing things besides Ween. They put out The Boredoms. They released Guar's first album, which they were also in that area. So Mark Kramer, it might sound like Bongwater is some kind of stoner, silly group, but in actuality, Bongwater was like a high-level performance kind of art group. So Shimmy Disc is actually a really interesting underground, incredibly important and lo-fi label. I don't know a lot about it, but I got that album pretty recently and it really blew my mind. But getting back to Ween's The Pod, let's start with some comments from you, Mike. I wanted to put you under the spotlight a little bit by making you actually give this a real listen and see if anything came to mind about what this album brings about the feelings of maybe.
yeah. Well, thank you for the recommendation. I really enjoyed it. Both times I did a deep dive. I did listen the second time in headphones, like you recommended. It's quite an experience, quite a sprawling collection of songs. I think it's 90s in the best way. It's lo-fi in the old sense of the word. You know what I mean? Where there's I guess the what I would say is it sounds like something you and I would have created uh
Yeah, yeah,
back
yeah.
then, or
Yeah.
wish we could have created.
Well, I mean, uh, I wanted to actually read the liner notes, which is something kind of boring to read because I remember when I got this CD, which was actually at the time the last Ween album that was released that I got. I got it in Reno where I was going to college, and I was obsessed with Ween. And when I got this, you know, I kind of figured it would be their worst album because it at the time did not get a lot of praise. But the liner notes, which was a one-page CD, not even a booklet, basically says this. Recorded by Dean and Gene Ween on a Tascam 4-track cassette recorder between January and October 1990. All songs recorded at the pod where we lived for a year and 10 months with our cat Mandy. The pod was scenically located on Van Sant Road in Salisbury Township, Pennsylvania. Our apartment was a haven for flies because it sits in the middle of a horse farm. In the time this album was completed, we filled up 3,600 hours of tape, inhaled 5 cans of Scotch Guard. That's the controversial part. This album was then produced and mixed by Andrew Weiss, who, by the way, is the bassist for the Rollins band. Rollins is a huge Ween guy, and that's probably the connection there. At the Zion House of Flesh, Hopewell, New Jersey, straight to dat, man. Mean Ween played the bass on Alone, and that's him on the cover doing up some Scotch Guard powered bongs. We got evicted on October 1st, 1991, but Dave Ayers says he's going to help us out covering art designs by Logarithms. So, of course, the cover I showed,
This is great.
we got to do, there we go. The cover, and there's no reason for it whatsoever, is Mean Ween, apparently, who's this third member who wasn't really a member. And they're spoofing Leonard Cohen's Greatest Hits, which I've also owned since the 90s. Great album. Why? I have never been able to find a single thing. There's not a single Leonard Cohen cover on here. There's no point to it. It's almost like they just had it lying around that apartment or something.
Well, is it
Uh,
not like when
really
you and
bizarre.
I we did a spoof of Sinead O'Connor's Universal Mother album, and we
And
created our album Universal Moth.
right. But I have no idea. You found the CD cover somewhere and cut off the ER?
Yeah, well, everything we did came out of magazines. I found some
Right.
magazine ad for it, and it's like it's perfect. It's going to fit right on the cassette jacket.
Yeah, so essentially it's just, I mean, collage art, I guess. It's pretty crude when you look at it. Hopefully you could tell by me holding it up there that it in the Ween one, it's Leonard Cohen's hand. They just replaced. This is Leonard Cohen's hand. They just replaced the head and the smoking apparatus there, which, by the way, Ween now says that that is fake, but I don't know if that's just to discourage fans. I saw Ween 2 years ago, and it was an amazing experience. It was right at the end of COVID, but I will tell you this: their fans do not shy away from inhalants
Scotch guard.
everywhere outside. Before the show and after the show, people were selling balloons of inhalants, and Lord only knows what's in them, but it
Wow.
is really something. So I would imagine Ween's trying to discourage that. But getting back to the pod here, this came out in '91, which is pretty amazing because what Nirvana,
Mhm.
Nevermind, Pearl Jam 10, and then these fools releasing their second album, homemade and actually somehow getting picked up by a major indie label with some, recognition even at that time. And this would get them a major label contract. This album.
Well, about that. So when you first listen to it, I mean, I would say the average person would probably not get very far. Is that fair to say?
I would say they wouldn't get past 20 seconds of track one.
Right. But here's the thing, when you listen to it, it the talent is undeniable. The song craft is there. And I think
Yeah.
that people who are willing to give it a chance could sense that. Um, it's basically dudes messing around and every now and then creating moments of brilliance. And there's the space, they had the space to do that. Maybe it was
Mhm.
being in the 90s when I don't know if it's easier now or if it was easier back then to sort of experiment like this. And, you go back to Zappa or you think about today and how easy it is for anybody to get GarageBand or whatever and just put down anything they want to record. So I don't know if it's easier or more difficult. I just know that the time was right in the early 90s for this sort of thing.
Yeah, Ween had some sort of strange buzz, like in New Hope in Pennsylvania. They played where they lived a lot, and I guess it was an art scene. I remember you actually gave me my first Ween album in high school, Chocolate and Cheese, which, is Ween well recorded, but it has all their sounds. It has funk, it has soul, it has psychedelic rock, it has, you know, uh cumbia, it has everything. There's everything in a Ween album, and most bands won't try that or do that, but I think they were just really well known. I should
Mhm.
look more into that, but the
Are you
thing that
saying
I
I
didn't
gave
understand when
you, did I give you chocolate and
yes,
cheese?
yeah, I think you were a senior, and that was quite the CD to open up at high school, and I was like, oh, well, yeah, I did want this one. I really did. This is quite the cover. Uh, And I mean, I love that album. The other crazy thing about that album is, to get off tangent here, but that album was also simultaneously released on Grand Royal with the Beastie Boys. It was like one of their first releases.
Hmm.
So Ween just had this weird buzz. And what I didn't get when I first started getting Ween, like I said with Chocolate and Cheese, is that I didn't understand the dichotomy. There were two people and they played with a drum machine, and then later they got a band. But at the time, I didn't understand the dichotomy between the two members. But I do now. I now know that Dean Ween is one of the greatest living guitarists that exist and has always been a prodigy. And then Gene kind of dabbles in guitar and is more of a songwriter, and is not much of a guitarist. But Dean Ween, even if you listen to their first album, he is really, and it's really prevalent here on the pod. If whenever you hear a crazy lick, that's Dean, and he's not doing much songwriting, he's not doing much singing, he's doing a little bit of silly background stuff, saying pork roll, egg, and cheese over and over again. But
Over and over again.
47 times, I believe, is the count for the album. And of course, it's really helped by the song "She Blanks Me," which has the phrase "pork roll, egg, and cheese" repeated over and over, like I mentioned. But then also there's the song "Pork Roll, Egg, and Cheese," and then the fan favorite "Frank," which is about the place where they go to get pork rolls and eggs and cheese. That's kind of a lot to say there.
Do you suppose
So
Frank still exists?
I imagine he lives in New Hope, Pennsylvania. And another fun thing with I think I got Pure Guava next in high school. And when you open that one in the CD booklet, it has like their crazy, like, if you imagine the pod was crazy, like them living in their apartment, the Pure Guava has that picture of like what I can only refer to as some kind of crazy anarchy, psychedelic commune. And Gene and Dean are in it. And it's like, I guess maybe the township or, it's like Amish Quaker County or whatever. But wherever they grew up, like it was a free spirited, free your mind kind of environment. And I think that's where Ween comes out of. And to the
So
nth degree.
I remember the first time I experienced Ween was on Beavis and Butthead.
Right. Push the little daisies.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's funny how
It
Beavis and Butthead
was
was
recorded on
definitely
helium, apparently.
it was a conduit for kids like us to experience new
Uh,
bands.
I used to say that was my favorite Ween song, and it might still be. Um,
So
it really is a great song.
I have a favorite moment on this album. Do you want to guess what
Okay.
it is?
Uh, I'm looking over my notes here. Um, there's so many. There's
This
so
is
many, but I'm gonna go with pollo asado. That's the chicken.
it's very good. I enjoy Pollo Asado more
Not a
than I
song,
expected
but
to. I mean, a song like that makes you think that the whole album is going to be a comedy album or novelty album or whatever.
yeah.
But I mean, there's okay. I'll just tell you my favorite moment. So
Okay. All right.
it is the second half of Right to the Ways and the Rules of the World when
Mm-hmm.
they break out into hysterical laughter just because
Yep.
and I think it's just one of these great musical moments where the two of them they're doing this ridiculous prog rock send up and
Right.
it reminds me a lot of what they would do later on the Mollusk, which is a record that I love that you got me into, but it
Mm-hmm.
reminds me of that like super serious taking yourself very seriously sort of progressive rock thing. And then at the,
Yep.
at the end
It's Buckingham Green, really, is really what
yeah,
it is, which apparently is an older song, actually. But
okay,
yeah, they just lose it. They lose
they
it
lose it.
completely.
Well, and it's not just that they lose it, and then immediately we go into Captain Fantasy. And when I guess it's Gene when he comes in with that ridiculous filter on his voice. I think Captain Fantasy is the best song on the album. It's like
Right.
traffic meets hair metal, and I just was laughing out loud. The combination of the previous song coming into that, I was like, this is the brilliance here.
Yep.
There's a lot
Yep.
of kind of
It's
hazy
like
parts of the
mid-album,
album,
right? Yeah,
but
mid-album. Yep.
that moment right there is I was like, okay, there's something special here.
Oh yeah. I mean, those are fantastic picks. I would be lying if I said that when I was having trouble sleeping last night, I could not get right to the ways and the rules of the world unstuck from my head. And I didn't even listen to this album last night, so I don't know. I was just thinking about this album, but yeah, it's great. There is a lot of parts in this album where there's laughter. I mean, they're recording on 4 track. Why would there not be? You know, why would they not be laughing about what they're doing?
Oh.
I don't know. Somehow their first album was actually released. I would only assume that what they thought they were doing here was developing songs to never be heard. I
Mhm.
mean, there's apparently like at least two downloadable pod outtake albums because, like I said, 3,600 hours of tape. So I mean, there's all kinds of, I mean, that's like a lifetime of music right there. I'm sure most of it's awful, but what's kept here is all gold. There's hardly, if you listen to this album enough, you'll see that there's hardly any throwaways, truly. Some people say Laura, and that one's not great, or Boing, or even Alone, which apparently is the one with their bass player on it. Um, I think those songs are okay. if I can have just a second to mention some stuff that I like.
Please.
Dr. Rock is like a great, it like kicks off the album because the opener is beyond insanely ridiculous. Um, we'll skip Frank, but Sorry Charlie, which is a Dean song, really shows his talents as a songwriter. It's a
Yep.
country song, and I absolutely that's a like a fan favorite. And it just leads into what Dean will write with the country album, which is
Yeah.
Piss Up a Rope, which apparently his
Real
dad said
quick,
all the time.
sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt, but
No,
before
you're
we move
good.
on from Dr. Rock, I think that's a better Kiss song than anything Kiss ever created.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you listen to Kiss's songs, they're really bad. They're really bad. Kiss is an awful band with a lot of makeup,
But this is an example of they're doing a send up of that style, and it ends up actually being great.
right? It's an anthemic song. I 20 years ago had a shirt I made that said Dr. Rock. And unfortunately, I had two crackheads in my life try to buy it off me. But I had to explain to them that it was not that kind of rock. But it's a great song. But what I wanted to highlight as well, really quick here, was Demon Sweat and Don't Sweat It, which highlights their Prince and their absolute obsession with Funkadelic and Parliament. That especially Dean Ween has said that his whole life he's just been ripping off Eddie Hazel of Parliament, Funkadelic, and one of the greatest guitarists, and the Allman Brothers. So he just only knows two solos, but I mean those are a couple solos to know, I guess, because those two songs I think are brilliant on here, and they're not automatically something to get into, but they're really interesting. And for years now, Ween hasn't put out a new album, and I've just been wishing that they would re-record the pod. Not that I don't like the fidelity on it, but there's so much here, and they do these songs live, and they're brilliant, and people love them. But you know, they could redo them, and it would just be maybe even a Billboard album. I don't know.
Do you know if they ever do sketches of Winkle live?
I'm sure they have. Ween will play anything. They did Pollo Asado live.
I just would like to see someone attempt that drum part on sketches of Winkle live.
Oh, yeah, seriously. Sketches of Winkle is also a reoccurring theme on this album. I don't know how many times it's mentioned, but and I don't know why. Like it's a crazy prog punk song of sorts. What other songs can we get into here? I mean, there's a little bit of Bob Dylan-y stuff on Alone. Or
Yep.
actually, I found out last night that it's actually supposed to be like this one guy from the Soft Boys. So obscure band reference, even by my terms. But and then of course there's the Stallion and the second Stallion. There are five Stallions in Ween's catalog.
Oh,
They have
really?
apparently them all in order. Yeah, Stallion Part 3 is on Pure Guava.
I enjoy the fact that Stallion Part One is not listed as explicit on Spotify.
Well, yeah, they're explicit songs, that's for sure.
It just cracks me up because he's basically just coming up with every expletive he can think of.
Yeah, I've always thought that the Stallion is like Gene, kind of like worshiping Dean, especially the Stallion part two, because like his guitar playing even then is so awesome. And I just imagine Gene like I just imagine him on the floor operating a four track with a mic, and Dean is standing up playing guitar licks, probably in some kind of really smelly haze. The other really important thing is that at this time, not only were they living together in this squalor, but they also both got serious cases of mononucleosis.
Hence the song.
Hence the song, which is a pretty great song, actually.
Yeah.
Uh, and it has some pretty great lyrics, which I can't recall on the spot. But
I think that
yeah,
you're making me like this album even more the more we talk about it because I'm just
it,
remembering all these great moments.
there's so much like I love that you brought up right to the ways of the rules of the world because there's so much laughter on this album, even early on. Like, not to bring up the stupidest song ever, Pollo Asado again, but apparently that is about Gene Ween's job at a Mexican restaurant. And this one customer he had who would order, he'd be like, "Do you make guacamole? I want some guacamole. Could you put guacamole on my burrito? Okay, I like guacamole. Okay, that'll be, and Gene is doing both voices there. It's just absolutely absurd. And the other funny thing about that song is that for years, and this will take you way back to the CD era, as in compact disc era, uh, when you get Ween's like CD singles, the hidden track, the like the oh I bought this to get the bonus track would usually OSB Pollo Asada. So you'd get like Freedom of 76, and the other track is Pollo Asado. So the people would be like, what? And I could just imagine Electra asking Ween, what should we do for the B-sides? And just be like, oh yeah, just put Pollo Asado on it again.
The 90s.
It's truly something.
So we're almost out of time. I do have to just say one thing. You can, of course, trace, like you said, there's Dylan-esque moments. There's like things that are maybe influenced by what they were listening to. I also can sense some future music was potentially maybe indirectly influenced by Ween. I was thinking there's a lot of sort of White Stripes energy to some of this. I
Sure.
think I think that maybe not in the lo-fi sense, but I mean, I don't know, just some of the softer White Stripes music. It kind of reminds me of this, I don't know, aesthetic, I guess.
No,
Um,
I can hear that. I can hear that, especially like I mean, the early White Stripes, the first album and the style, their second album, which is my favorite, is pretty lo-fi. I
yeah,
mean,
that's true.
but it uniquely has more of a blues garage feel
True.
than we typically would, but there is that same kind of spirit.
Hmm.
Uh, and it's a two-piece.
Yeah.
Of course, I think Ween really became the band they are now when they became a full band. So, and
Well,
they've
you
been the same lineup forever. They have Claude on drums, who's been with them forever, and then they have that bassist who is in Rollins' band. He also was in Pigface with Trent Reznor, all these strange things. And he's just such a normal guy. I think he did their first album, and he's a really talented bass player. He's always in the back, just doing his thing, just perfectly, perfectly. I
Well,
mean,
I think you have to admire the range, and I think that if you're someone like me who was unfamiliar, at least with this album, and if you want to give it a try, my advice would be keep going. Maybe
yeah,
come back to it because I think it rewards repeated listening.
it does. When I first got it, like I said, as my last Ween album at the time, the first time I was like, well, okay, that was better than I thought it'd be. And then second time I was like, wow, that's pretty good. And then by the time I'd given it a few spins, I was like, only thing I want to listen to by Ween is the pod because their first album is a little bit more of a first album in a lo-fi sense of just kind of being just really chaotic. But this one, it does have some sense of something. And I did want to do this album because it reminds me of our band in high school, the Hideous Kids, the Garage Punk Project. And
Never
it
forget.
really is about two friends, you know? So
Yeah, that's a little teaser. Maybe someday we'll do an episode about hideous kids. So
exactly. And also, maybe you'll pick The Pod by the Breeders. I don't know what year it came out, but
that would be good.
the Pods,
I think it
it
was
looks
90
like,
because
yeah.
wasn't Cobain influenced by it?
Well, I mean, it couldn't have been after this album, and this album is 91 and recorded in October 1990. So it's
Well,
really, it's really something.
thank you, Casey. I enjoyed
Yeah,
it.
yeah, that was fun.
Is it
I
time to
probably
reveal our next episode?
okay.
All right, get ready. Buckle your seatbelts. Next time on the podcast, we are going to be talking about Taylor Swift 1989. I will
I
be convincing
can't wait.
I will be convincing Casey of its greatness. Be sure to tune in for that one. It's maybe a little bit more mainstream than the pod by Ween.
Yeah, we're gonna get all the views, so click that bell and subscribe. All right, thanks, Mike.
All right.